If you're a pop culture junkie who loves TV, film, music, comedy, and other really important stuff, then you've come to the right place. Get ready and settle in for Classic Conversations, the best pop culture interviews in the world. That's right, we circled the globe so you don't have to. If you're ready to be the king of the water cooler, then you're ready for Classic Conversations with your host, Jeff Dwoskin.
All right, Sue, thank you so much for that amazing introduction. You get the show going each and every week, and this week was no exception. Welcome, everybody, to episode 321 of Classic Conversations. As always, I am your host, Jeff Dwoskin. Welcome to what's sure to be one of the most fantastic episodes ever. I could say doomed to be one of the most fantastic episodes ever because my guest is Joseph Culp, the world's first live-action Doctor Doom from Roger Corman's The Fantastic Four, the unreleased Fantastic Four. We're talking petitions to get that movie released. I'm excited. You should be excited. I am so into the lore of this movie, and that's all coming up in just a few seconds. And in these few seconds, would you believe this is a continuation of the fantastic episode from last week, episode 320 with Rebecca Staub, the original Sue Storm from Roger Corman's unreleased Fantastic Four. This episode with Joseph Culp, the original Doctor Doom, completes my Roger Corman Fantastic Four trilogy. Alex Hyde White from episode 260, Mr. Fantastic, Sue Storm, and now Doctor Doom. Will there be more? I do not know. But for right now, this trilogy of excellence is upon you. We're going to talk with Joseph coming up right now, talking about being the son of a famous actor, Robert Culp. And of course, we're diving deep into Roger Corman's Fantastic Four. Enjoy. All right, everyone, I'm excited to introduce my next guest, actor, director, the man behind the mask, the original Doctor Doom. Welcome to the show, Joseph Culp.
Thank you. Great pleasure to be here. Thank you, Jeff. Excited to be here talking with you.
I am excited to have you here. The Roger Corman Fantastic Four movie has always been, I've been obsessed with it. I have it on VHS. I got it at Comic-Con. It must have been over a decade ago. I remember watching it at least once. I've seen it multiple times on YouTube. I've had Alex Hyde White on it. I've talked to Rebecca. So I'm excited to have Doctor Doom, the original Doctor Doom. I want to get into all that. It's just the mystique of this movie is
Austria's history. Yes. That's wonderful. I'm glad to talk to you because we have so many fans over all these years. And it's, that's very gratifying, to say the least. The story of this film is prodigious.
Let's build up to the story of the film. One of the things you had in common with Alex, you had a famous father as well, the amazing Robert Culp.
Yep.
What was it like growing up with a famous father? And is that what led you to become an actor and a director?
All the above. Yes, I'm one of those second generations, like Alex Hyde White. My father, Robert Culp, very famous actor, also a writer and a director, but was very well known for your audience who might not know, primarily for doing the first fully interracial series in the 1960s called I Spy, which he co-starred with Bill Cosby, at that time was a rising comedian. And it was a super cool series about two spies traveling the world and who were best friends. So it broke the color barrier. It was a big civil rights kind of cause, that series. And my father was very well known for that. And then other great films like Bob Carroll, Ted and Alice. 70s, he did a lot of interesting, TV movies. Appearances on Columbo were quite famous. And in the 80s, one of the only early superhero series called The Greatest American Hero, which is kind of a cult favorite. So cult favorite and a cult favorite, so to speak. And so I grew up with that in Hollywood, you might say, around the business and on film sets since I was quite small. And certainly by the time I was in school, I was already showing my passion for getting up in front of people and in the theater and school plays. And pretty soon I was a young actor studying in New York and doing theater. And very soon I started to get parts in TV shows and film. And so it really, I always say it was, if you have a parent who's in the business, in a way, it gives you a certain permission to dream that you can do the same, which, may be more difficult sometimes coming from the outside of it. On the other hand, there's also kind of a burden to it as well. There's a kind of second, I say it's a blessing and a curse of it at the same time, because then if you have a famous parent, then you can be, somewhat in their shadow, so to speak, or how do you show your individual talent beyond what people may think about you? Like, oh, well, his dad's really famous, so what about him? So, I think that's a journey that actors of a second generation have to go on. If you get some celebrity early on or you do well, then that's one thing. But for many of us, it's a journeyman path. You have to gather experiences. I've done dozens of, independent films. Occasionally, then something with larger would hit. And all of that did kind of prepare me for around 1992 getting cast in the first version of the Fantastic Four, Roger Corman's Fantastic Four. So I'd say, yes, my preparations as an actor and my early experience. Also, I want to say that my dad, Robert, he was a very passionate fan of genre stuff. So since he was a little kid, in fact, most people don't know, he was actually going to be a comic artist. He was an excellent graphic, he could draw comics, and he did his own comics. He loved comics, bought them, breathed them, lived them. And it was just by accident that he went on the stage and it said, oh, actually, I want to be an actor. And it changed. So he never lost his talent for drawing, but it's interesting. And so he raised us, me and my siblings, with a love of fantasy films, fantasy animation. He made me a student of all of that. And so I think when Fantastic Four came along, it was like, yeah, I could do that. I could do this. I like to do the bizarre and the monstrous. And, Lon Chaney Sr. was like my idol, and all the universal horror and all that too. So somehow going into the shoes of Dr. Doom, I was primed for that.
So you mentioned The Greatest American Hero, which is, I think if I picture your dad, I think just based on where I was in my life, that's where I primarily think of your dad is from that show. Because I think that was the show I was watching, like when TV really was, for some reason, The Greatest American Hero. If you grew up at that time, young teenager, it was just something that lived with you. It was
unusual. If you had a love for fantasy stuff, it was an unusual moment on early 80s television. Comic superhero basically every week. And my father played the hard-nosed FBI agent who was sort of the partner of William Catt, the star.
Such a great show. And then I was always aware that your dad was iconic from like I Spy and, with Bill Cosby, and such an important show. So let me ask you a question. If I'm doing the math correctly, when you're young, 10-ish, 8 to 10, your dad's just coming off I Spy, give or take a couple of years. Meaning like as a young Joseph Culp, your dad is at the height at that moment of like stardom. Like what's it like just going to the mall?
I mean, that's a very real experience when your father or mother are really that recognizable. And my dad was, plain and simple. We couldn't go anywhere without people looking and staring, and usually walking over and trying maybe to pull an autograph. I saw that since I think I became conscious of it by the time I was 7 or 8. Yeah, 7, probably 6, I don't know, really was aware quite yet. I knew he was kind of important somehow, But by 7, I was noticing it. And when we were in restaurants or, going to Disneyland or doing something, that was with family, it was a thing. And what happens, I think, is you, to be really honest about it, you both feel kind of proud and kind of marvel at your father, to use a word marvel, and a little bit embarrassed, maybe a lot embarrassed, and kind of like, oh, everyone's looking at us. How is that? It's not normal somehow. You kind of knew that. I knew like it's odd. People always come over. People always in the restaurant. And my dad was generally quite gracious about it. He wanted his privacy, but he was, generally, sometimes he'd get in the wrong time, wrong mood. He's like, please, go away and don't bother us here. I'm trying to have lunch with my kids, or whatever. But I also went to I went to a boarding school early by about 8 and a half with a lot of other kids who also had celebrity parents. So, Marlon Brando's son was there for a while. In fact, Tatum O'Neal, who was quite famous child actor in the 70s, and her father, Ryan O'Neal, and Tatum went to the school with us. I was kind of, it became a bit like I'm immersed in that a bit. But my dad tried very hard to, I think, normalize it and be a good dad anyway, even if he wasn't there a lot of the time because he was working, or he had this, the aura around him of stardom. And yes, it was exactly at that time, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm very aware that my dad is this persona. And then, I think that me and my siblings also knew, this is another part of it. So I said, kind of proud of him, kind of embarrassed to be me because I'm just a kid and I'm obviously not as important as this man. And then there's other aspects too, where you, feel that I should be kind of, like I'm kind of the keeper a bit of my father's stardom, because you can only imagine in schools, kids either might want to like you because your dad's special, your mom's special, or they might resent you and think, well, what makes you so special? And that whole trip, it's like, that's very real. You know how kids are. They can feel jealous or they can feel envious and mean about it. And then you have to feel like I'm defending my dad, and like our family. So it's complicated. I won't kid you. And I think it takes many years to figure out your way around that. And I think I did.
When you're that young, is part of the weirdness of it, I guess, that you have, in a way, you're sharing your dad with everyone? I mean, the people just can walk up and say, hey, Mr. Culp, can I get your autograph? And you're eating dinner. It's like your dad time. It's family time. It's like, that's got to be an interesting thing to process as a young kid. Yeah.
You have no choice somehow, but your parent is shared with the public. It's a strange thing, it's like I said, I think it's both something you could feel special about, but at the same time, you can feel kind of burdened by it, and I think a lot of kids went through that just like me, who had a parent recognizable like that. Sometimes the positives hopefully outweigh the negatives.
So one of the positives would be, again, back to Greatest American Hero. This is your first acting gig is with your dad.
That's, probably the only time my dad ever did a little inside nepotism, because he was not like that. He was like, well, you want to be an actor? You better go figure that out. He really was not like a gung-ho, because my brother is also an actor. And he was very much like, well, you go prove it if you really mean it. He wasn't immediate in his support, I would say. He wasn't averse to it, but he wasn't immediate. But that he really went for it. He said, look, I have this show. He says, I want to write and direct some episodes, because he was always trying to get his own writing and direct his own stuff. And sure enough, on the last season, he said, I'm going to write this script, give it to Stephen J. Cannell, and I'm going to try and cast my boys in it. And it really was a moment where I have this power, this capability at this moment, and I'm going to try and do it. We still had to come out, and I remember my brother and I, we played brothers, and from a Latin American country, so we both had Spanish accents, and we studied our Spanish accent to do it very Ricardo Montalban, I don't know. We had to go in front of casting, and my dad was there, and the casting director is there. So it's kind of a setup, but the producer was like, well, sounds okay. Your boys, I'm sure they're fine. We need to see them. And so we did. My brother and I rehearsed our scenes just because we were theater actors in New York, and we were coming back to LA to audition for our father's show. Even though it was, when I think about it, it's like, well, what were they going to say? Baba, no, I don't think we can use your sons. It's a balancing act at that point. And so sure enough, thank you, Dad. You gave me my first experience on a professionally on camera. I'd done a lot of we'd done a lot of home movies growing up. You can believe that, a lot. Always had a camera running. And I even did some student projects, stuff like that. This was my first professional gig, and he gave it to me. And I will always be grateful. And I never repeated, except years later, I was making a film, and we appeared in 3 other movies together, one in which I was the producer. So I begged him to be in the movie, and he
Hunger?
was in that movie called Hunger. That's right. and where he plays the producer, and I'm the poor, starving writer. And there's really phenomenal scenes between us, which paralleled our relationship in a certain way. And this was, I was fully an adult by then. And then a couple of other movies where we were just cast, not independently, but independently of each other, where we appeared in the movies Panther and a movie called Innocence. And I always thought, well, the casting on that just said, well, we have young Culp, let's get the older Culp, or vice versa. So we had our moments, me and my dad.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
So, all right. So Greatest American Hero. And then there's the Highway to Heaven. You got there's a bunch of gigs that you've got before Dr. Doom.
I had a few. I was in a movie by Alan Jake Pakula called Dream Lover. That was, really a big hit, but he's a great director. Directed many great films like All the President's Men. And so I had some experience under my belt before I got to Doom, but nothing. What could prepare me for doing Dr. Doom?
What could prepare Joseph Culp for what was
prepare
to come
Joseph
next?
Culp? Well, a lot could, actually. A lot did prepare me, but I certainly never expected something like that to happen at that moment. And then the story that unfolded is pretty much beyond belief.
So let's dive into some of the infamous story and it's been 30 years. Towards the end, we'll talk about the petition you have to get it released, which is exciting because that would be fun. All right. So how did you become aware of the Fantastic Four to begin with? I don't mean the comic book. I mean the movie. Your agent, whatever. You're like, hey, and was Dr. Doom originally was that the only role you tried out for?
Yes, absolutely. It began certainly with a call from my agent, and I got a hold. I don't remember if I got the whole script or if I really just got the scenes. Probably just the scenes. No, I may have gotten the whole script. I remember going, they're casting what? The Fantastic Four? You mean the Marvel comic that I used to read when I was, kid? And who's doing that? Roger Corman's doing it. Wait a minute. That's, we had seen some superhero films, as we all know. And it was, by the end of the 80s, beginning of the 80s, we had Superman. And then we had Batman, Tim Burton's Batman. Anyway, I just saw Roger Corman. First of all, I knew I'm a big film geek and film historian myself. So I said, well, Roger Corman, well, that's kind of awesome. But he only does cheap movies, just low budget movies. So all that stuff was reeling in my head. And I got the script and I said, Dr. Doom. And I just had I've often gone on record to say it's true that the Fantastic Four might have been the only comic I really thought was really, really cool when I was a kid. I mean, I knew from, Spider-Man and all that, Superman. But when I remember thinking about Marvels and the Hulk, I remember the 70s series, the Hulk, and certainly I'd seen comics of that. But when I think about, I believe, I'm really being truthful that when I think of Marvel and I think of something like Fantastic Four, I said there were four. They all had these unique, mutated abilities, a Human Torch, Invisible Girl, guy who stretched all over the place, Mr. Fantastic, and the Thing, Ben Grimm. And I knew that. Less in my memory was Dr. Doom. Even though I knew just reading the words and the role, I said, this is somebody. I just didn't have it in my mind. So I immediately went down and I looked at some comics at comic book store. And I went, aha, right. Now I remember. There's this guy and he's in a metal suit and a green cape. And he's kind of a brilliant mad scientist somehow. And he's like a lord. He's like a tyrant king. He has this nature, And so I kind of got it under my skin a little bit and thought, well, whatever this project is, I'm going in there. I'm going to do my damnedest to knock this out. And so that's how it started. I did go to that casting session.
What kind of, I think, reinvigorated my interest in the story and all the lore was I saw Doomed. It popped up on my Fire Stick. And so, which is a great documentary about of this movie. And, it was you were in it, you're all in it. And it was just amazing to kind of watch you and all your co-stars kind of just talk about how passionate you were about this movie that eventually perhaps was just a ruse. I mean, just a kind of a financial shell game type thing so that they could keep the rights to it.
It's quite a story. And it depends, from what point of view you want to look at it. As the truth, will never fully be known, I think. For one reason, because Bernd Eichinger, the producer who held the rights to the Fantastic Four, he's passed away. And he never went on record to say whether or not the film was intended or never intended to be released. We do know, and we know from Roger Corman and from a lot of stuff that came out later, the story is that the reason why Roger Corman was producing it is because the German producer who held the rights had to have a film in production by the end of 1992, or he would lose the rights. He had the rights because Marvel had been selling off rights for years because they were just trying to stay afloat. And this guy, Bernd Eichinger, knew it was, I don't know what he got the rights for, but it wasn't for much, probably. And he was not going to lose them because he said there's got to be a way to have a big superhero movie, the way Batman has been and all of that. So he contacted Roger Corman. This much we know, and we know it from all the stories that came out in that documentary, Doomed, which was really well researched, well interviewed. So whole thing was just streamlined overnight. The writer was commissioned to write a script, Craig Nevius, and within a month they were casting it, and we were going to go into production, before the end of the year, all so that a contractual agreement could be sustained, and we were making a movie. And that's what you hear in that wonderful documentary. So I hope your listeners will maybe check that out if they haven't seen it. Yes, and that goes back to how the casting went, which was that each one of us, Rebecca Staub, Alex Hyde-White, Jay Underwood, and myself, and Michael Bailey Smith, were absolutely passionate about doing this movie. We were absolutely taking the opportunity and say, we're going to do this. Whatever is coming, whether it's Roger Corman producing it or Marvel or 20th Century Fox, we're gonna do our best. And the director, Oli Sassoon, was absolutely committed. So I went into that session and Oli said, that was great. Can you do it again and do it even bigger? Like, this is Dr. Doom. So I'm challenging you. Don't be a method actor about this. I want to see fireworks. And I went, okay, here it comes. And so I really went for it. And, this is a case where I view being over the top is okay. Dr. Doom is over the top. He is the top and then some. So, I think it's important to always remember that when you look at this performance. It's outsized. It outsizes the movie in some respects. But, I just didn't hold back. And again, my love of monster movies, and I'm also trained a bit classically, bringing some of that to the table. And I just said, I just figure out how to make this most authentic and true to the comic. And that's what everybody was really up to. That's what the actors wanted, all my co-stars, the writer and the director. He says, look, we don't have a lot of money. We're going to make it as true to the comic as we can. That was our directive. That was our main goal. It was like, can you match the drama, the humor, the pathos, the sincerity even of these characters? And that's what you see in the movie, I think. Many people say, well, it's a bit cheesy, it's a bit sentimental, and yet, so many fans go, but it works. That is the Fantastic Four. That's what we expect.
Sorry to interrupt. I have to take a quick break. I do want to thank everyone for their support of the sponsors. When you support the sponsors, you're supporting us here at Classic Conversations, and that's how we keep the lights on. And now back to my conversation with Joseph Culp. More Doom. It does work. I've seen it quite a few times, and it's a fun movie. I will say I found, probably through some of the Petition links and stuff, that Slash film, Whitney Seibold. This is from February 2024, not too long ago. They ranked all 5 of the Fantastic Fours, and that includes Doctor Strange, John Krasinski as Reed. And they put you as the number 1 best Fantastic Four. The worst being the 2015 reboot, then Doctor Strange, then the first Fantastic Four that came after yours, the high budget one, and then the Rise of the Silver Surfer is the second best one, and then the Roger Corman Fantastic Four Classic as number 1.
Come on. What?
How cool is that?
How cool is that? And after all these years, and now let's add to the irony of the whole thing. So we did this movie. And we did our level best to just embody the roles. And it was a terrific script in a real, I always want to say, a classic way, a classic style. The way we might envision those characters coming off of the page. We're not trying to make them cool in a modern sort of way. We're saying they do say these perhaps cliche or anachronistic things, that are part of that, written in 1962, the original Fantastic Four. And in a way, we were kind of playing to that. And it's kind of wonderful. The director Oli Sasson did such a great job, I think, because he knew we don't have the special effects, we don't have the big budget set pieces, but what we got is a story, and we got the characters. We're going to just tell it that way. And he added all kinds of cool things, like, he kind of told it a little bit from, like with a comic edge, like even some of the angles and, doing Dutch angles and doing stuff that, even back to the Batman days or whatever, like Batman series days in a certain way. He said, even camp is okay here a bit, a little bit campy. He certainly encouraged me to just go for it and give as many layers to Doom as possible. But all that being said, that people embraced it, and they embraced it after the fact. Because, as you know, as the story comes down, by the time we were ready to release the film, and don't tell me they weren't going to release it, because Roger Corman never did not release a film that he made. Never. Except this one. And only because it was bought back from him at the last minute by the producer, by Constantine Films. Roger was going to, we were on press junket. We were signing autographs. We went to Comic-Con. And this is back in the days when I always say comic book culture around the time of this film. For me, I would almost nearly call it still underground culture. It hadn't yet gone mainstream. That happened later. That happened within the next 10 to 15 years, where it was like, now all the CGI was great. You could do X-Men. You could do, Marvel could do everything it wanted to. It hadn't taken off yet. And so we were still in a period where our fans were hardcore, they were loyal, and they were ready to see this film. And when when the plug was pulled, so to speak, it was an enormous shock to everybody. And yeah, the backroom deals and all of that, totally unaware of it. Director called me up and said, Joseph, I got to tell you, don't know how to tell you. Film's not coming out. It's getting shelved. What do you mean? And he didn't have an explanation. And we didn't get one for years and years. So I'm telling the whole story of what happened to the film at the last minute as a precursor to the great irony that you and I are talking about today. The irony is, very slowly, the film started making its way out through bootlegs, VHS copies like the one you have. Years, it started circulating through comic book stores and Comic-Cons and various cons around conventions. And within the next 5 years or so, it was quite common that people said, oh yeah, I have a copy of that. Not very good, but we can see it. Some more years go by and DVDs start appearing that are actually higher quality. I have some intel on how that happened too. Some of us had 3/4-inch tape copies of the film. Those got leaked out, shall we say, as well, when digital stuff was better. So you started seeing, DVDs showing up in comic book conventions and being traded. And eventually it winds up on YouTube, and the rest is history. The film becomes one of probably the most bootleg film of all time. I'm willing to say I think that's true. That you couldn't find one that was, I think certainly in the tens of thousands, and who knows, maybe a million. This film has made its way around, and therefore has become a fan favorite and has outpaced even the other ones, as you're just telling us now on this list. So how is that possible? It's a film that was never officially released is the favorite. It's an amazing story, for sure.
It is an amazing story. Now, I know you have a petition to get it released.
Ah, the petition.
Do you think, as amazing as it would be to be released, don't get me wrong, do you think the mystique of it not being released it's worth having that? Like, you lose that mystique the second it goes mainstream. It's such a...
that's a valid point of view. But, we've had Mystique for 30 years.
You're over Mystique. I'm done with Mystique.
I'm kind of like, I basically just want to go on record as saying, listen, folks, Marvel has its universe. This is part of the Marvel universe. To not acknowledge it as part of the Marvel universe when indeed it has this many fans and who all agree film is important to them is a shame. And I believe that we've had the Mystique and we should now take it to the next level, which is an official release of this film that, frankly, you don't have to go on YouTube or look for a bootleg to go see it. We're on the third generation of fans now. And I would hope that the kids of kids can say, oh, I can go see that film. I can get it on streaming, or I can get a Blu-ray of it. I just think it's time to at least, for the 30th anniversary, to make some noise about this. I just feel good noise, I call it. And I guess I'm ready for the mystique to be part of its history and not the future. I'd rather have the future be the film finally gets a kind of due. And I don't personally thrive on the mystique myself. I think it's I don't feel like a victim at all. It is what it is. But I can cite you many other films that were rescued from obscurity and were remastered and brought out. I mean, silent films, there's whole preservation societies that go into like restoring films and trying to get them to the public. Why shouldn't the Fantastic Four that has a loyal fan base, why shouldn't it have the same? So that's my position on the petition.
I mean, I do think it would be amazing. And as you say in the open letter, it will lift the curse of the Fantastic Four, which they need to lift before the new Pedro Pascal one comes out, which looks promising, but they have had a run of bad luck.
I wrote this open letter using, this is the theory I'm offering. I think you and many others have concurred. It's as if there's a curse to this film franchise. And I posit that part of the problem is that the first film has been denied on some level. And I link that to systemic theory, which is a whole philosophical theory that says when you don't honor ancestors or some part of your family system, you get problems. If stuff like old traumas or things are hidden, if that stuff stays around in the family system, it shows up in later generations. Even in, they say, epigenetics, the genetic codes get modified. So I know it sounds a bit kooky and a bit out there, but not really when you think about it. And why shouldn't that be true with a film franchise? It could be. And we happen to know that I just say like the fans that were disappointed initially, I think it's carried over a bit into like, all right, well, now you're going to show us another Fantastic Four. Maybe we don't trust you so much with your, taking care of the legacy of the Fantastic Four because you kind of, screwed over the first film, which we really like. So I think there's something there. I'm willing to say it's just a theory, but it's not too bad a one if you were looking for reasons. Why is there sort of a curse on the Fantastic Four? It just doesn't work out. And I would hope that the new one is wonderfully successful. But I'll bet you, if you were to release the old Fantastic Four, the very first, the origin film, so to speak, you would do something, you being Marvel, that would be such a treat for the fans and would be an exciting moment. I just know social media would really kind of go crazy for a minute and say, what do you think? The old Fantastic Four is finally being released. Those fans are going to be more primed for the new one. And that's my theory. That's Joseph, maybe stretching it a bit. But I don't know. I think there's a curse and it should be lifted. And this is the way to do it.
It's not crazy. If you look at it from a marketing point of view, it's not a crazy thing to say, release the one that's never been as a primer to get people excited for the new one.
Purely as a marketing ploy, it would be great.
Who needs to do this? Who needs to hear your open letter and your petition? Who literally can make this happen?
Pretty much one man. And his name is K. And Kevin Feige, who certainly knows our film and is a great, mastermind himself, the whole trajectory of the MCU. I mean, Kevin Feige is really quite a talented person. It's really him that has carried this vision for the MCU for the last decade or so. And so, yes, a person like Kevin or those around him would say, that might be a really cool thing to do. Why not rescue this film from this strange kind of purgatory, the way Dr. Doom wants to rescue his mother from hell, and, release the Fantastic Four? It would be a terrific marketing moment for Marvel Studios, and a great precursor to the next film, I guess, is going to come out in 2025. So I think on the 30th anniversary of the unreleased, I'll call it, of the Fantastic Four, I decided to write this open letter and write up a petition and send it out there. As much for myself to feel that I'm not just going quiet about this. Again, I don't I don't thrive on the mystique per se. I mean, it's a wonderful irony that this film became popular even though it never got released. But as I say, I think it's time to take it to the next level, and it could be a lot of fun to do that. So, and I think it would lift the curse. So saith Dr. Doom.
I feel like you all deserve it. I know what I said about, keeping the mystique, but I do know you guys put your heart and soul into this. I know the people, when this movie, from watching the documentary, when it wasn't going to happen, still went and finished it. The music folks came in and spent like thousands of dollars of their own money to put the music in. They're really the only thing, some maybe overlaid special effects and some fixing of some of the sound, the vocals with the mask and stuff. But it's like, you guys all like secretly like finished this movie.
No artist, I don't care how artsy they are, doesn't want their work to be seen. Now, luckily, my work in this film has been seen by a lot of terrific people and fans and all that, and the other actors too, and the director. But although I always feel the director got the shortest shrift, shall we say, of the whole thing, because, a director, actors too, but especially a director only gets his next job because of what he directed before. Ole deserved that. So yeah, there's a sense of like deserving for work to be seen. And I also want to add, just for history, for posterity, it's important that works are not banned or shelved unceremoniously for no really good reason. Maybe there was a reason then, and I get it. I accept that. Part of the history, in fact. How cool would it be for it now to be available? Since Marvel, in my view, owns the universe anyway, so it's like they don't lose anything. They can only gain from it. In the early days, I kind of understand, yes, Marvel and the producer wanted to make a big budget Fantastic Four. They felt this would impact that. Who knows? It's 3 decades later, and I don't think they're going to be impacted negatively at all. It's part of history. It's like watching old Hulk episodes. The Hulk made his way into Marvel universe and did very well.
Absolutely.
They remade that several times, as I recall.
Yeah. You stay in touch with the cast. You guys are still Fantastic Four family?
Yeah, I would call it the Fantastic Four family for sure. Yeah.
Have you guys thought about doing like some cons, it being the 30th anniversary, like going out and like getting attention and media press that way?
So last December, a journalist in, how did that work? Oh, Mark Sykes. Mark Sykes, who was one of the original casting assistants from the film, and later became the producer of Doomed, directed by Marty Langford, produced by Mark Sykes. Mark had got an invite or whatever, threw his hat in the ring to do a panel at LA Comic-Con, Los Angeles, and asked us if we all wanted to do it. And I came out, and Ole came from New Orleans, and Craig Nevius, the first time Craig has ever appeared, I think, in public to talk about the film. He was the screenwriter, and he kind of, stayed away from the whole thing for many years. Glenn Garland, the editor, who worked so closely with Ole during that year of making the film. And Rebecca was going to come, and she couldn't make it. Rebecca stopped. And at the last minute, she had a gig or something. And so we all went in front of an audience and screened Doomed. That was the thing. Mark Sykes showed Doomed, and then we got up and talked about it. And this kind of started the ball rolling a bit. And we got some calls for interviews. And then it occurred to me, I said, Ole, I talked to the director, and I said, this is going to be our 30th year. And we should really go for it, I think. And just, not let it just sleep. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about our film. We're proud of it. We know it's a part of history. And I think Marvel is in a terrific position to do something with it. And so that's what happened. And so the answer to your quite long answer to your question is yes, I think this is the year to do it. And I think someone, I think in Los Angeles, suggested we do it again, either do Comic-Con or LA Con this year and try and get everybody there and do that.
That would be amazing.
That would be great. One time there was a terrific guy in St. Louis, had a wonderful convention called Contamination, it was called. Dave Dyer. And Dave flew us out, and I was there. We all came. Jay Underwood, who, basically got out of acting some years ago, he came too. And we all appeared and did some signings. And sure enough, he said, look, we're not going to charge any money. We're going to screen it. And he screened it in a hotel ballroom for probably, a little over 100 people. it was really sweet. It was like we're watching the film with an audience for the first time ever. This was some years ago, too, over 10 years ago. And people laughed and clapped, and it was like a hoot, and it was also fun. It was just pure fun. And I saw in that moment what this could be if you were to do some screenings, if we could, because that was denied to us. We never got to have that experience. And I saw what it could be. And I saw it through the lens of fans with that much, the whole story behind us. It's just like, okay, it never got released. It got out in the underground, so to speak. And now we got to watch it with fans who really dug it. And it was really a lot of fun. So I take that moment and I remember that moment. And I think I'd like to see that again.
That would be fun. When you said underground and you were discussing it, I was like, oh, midnight showings and people dress up as the Fantastic Four or Doom and they do lines from the movie and stuff like that.
Now, that's funny, actually. That could actually happen, I think, if it was, available for, midnight showings at various art theaters. Yeah.
Too funny.
No, of course, what I mean when I say underground is that I maintain that this is true, that in 1993, 94, we just hadn't comic book fandom, so to speak, just was underground, but it wasn't mainstream yet. It was slowly starting. And I think, by the time of X-Men, and I'm not sure what year that was, but, by the 2000s, it was really rolling. By Iron Man, all of a sudden, these were blockbuster films. Effects were great, and the characters were fully realized. And to me, Marvel took over. Marvel is the biggest film franchise of all time. There isn't anything bigger.
It's amazing what they did building that universe. It is
amazing.
And I believe that Kevin made everything canon, so technically you're canon. There you go.
I read that and I put it in my open letter. It's like, well, Kevin, you said that you're aware that there are many other films and TV shows, Marvel material made by other directors or other filmmakers in other times, but that are regarded as canon. And he said, don't be surprised if those things couldn't work their way into the multiverse. And so I really take him at his word saying, well, Fantastic Four 1994 is, let's say, yes, make that part of the multiverse.
Even it's just an interesting cameo or something like that, it would be amazing.
Of course. All of us would dig that there was some kind of cameo. I have to say, I didn't do the petition for that reason. I really did it because I think there's something special about the film and mostly on a level of history that it deserves to be seen. But hey, if you want to mix it up in the multiverse, I'm there with you.
I agree with you. It deserves its place in history. It deserves its spot on the mantle. I put my VHS on my bookshelf, so it's always there. It's one of those things. It's just, it exists. It'd be nice if it was just embraced for you guys. Because I know it must have been such a tease, right? I mean, there was a trailer. You had Film Threat magazine, Chris Gore had it on the cover of the magazine. There was stuff planned. You had publicity shots.
They flew us to Florida. They flew us to, various places. I mean, they spent money. Roger Corman does not spend money on anything.
That is what I hear.
I still have 8x10s, that I had to sign, which were some pretty cool. They were black and whites, a shot of Dr. Doom.
I would love one of those, Joseph. I have one of Alex. He sent me one right there.
Happy to send you.
I would be honored. This is amazing. So what do you do? What's going on besides the petition and getting this released? What is, Joseph, what are you up to these days?
Yes, well, putting some energy into that, but it's not my main deal at the moment, but it's something I'm passionate about. And I hope everyone hearing the podcast will click that up. Hopefully you'll see it in the notes at the end of the podcast and you'll sign that petition. Because I think, I know there's over 20,000 fans out there. We could, over the next several months, gather that many signers would be awesome. And who knows where that could lead. We can shape our futures.
Absolutely.
We can make choices and gather strength, especially from a grassroots. I always think, they say that the only way things ever really changed in the world were by a small group of people. And we are that. And so I am passionate about doing that and being vociferous about it. So, and posting it on Facebook and wherever you can post things, and Twitter. There's a terrific, by the way, I want to plug this, new documentary. Doomed is stellar. It's an amazing piece But it was like a 40-minute piece that's, I would say, even more of a fan-driven piece. And it's by a wonderful guy named Xavier Mendoza, and he calls it Tricked. The cast that was tricked into doing the Fantastic Four. And he kind of takes it from a different angle about, a guy who says, like, what about this movie? And he really kind of breaks it down, and he goes through it and comments on it as a fan. He's like, it's pretty darn good, actually. And I found myself loving this movie, and for all these reasons. Sure, it's cheap and kind of sentimental and all that, but the music is great. The actors are all terrific, and the director does a great job with it. I think it should be released, and give it some upgrades. Anybody could spend a couple $100 just, doing a remix and throwing in some new effects from After Effects or whatever.
With AI these days and whatever that Sora thing is that's coming.
You could literally, you could redo special effects on this in a day, with AI. And of course, I'd be happy to re-record any Doom stuff, or, probably with a good mixer, you can pull all that stuff out, and make it sound really good. That's taking up a little bit of time. Yeah, I'm doing a Netflix film called Monsters, based on the Menendez brothers story. A film I did just got released called Outlaw Posse by Mario Van Peebles. It's a Western, real revisionist history lesson kind of Western. And I play the sheriff in that. I have a indie film coming out called The Veteran, where I play a Vietnam veteran, title role. And meanwhile, I'm doing a lot of screenwriting right now. I've been hired. I don't know if your audience knows this. I'm an actor, but I'm also a filmmaker. And that means I'm a director and a writer. Also got that from dear old dad growing up. And so right now I'm on a job writing a pilot for a series, doing that right now.
Amazing. Fantastic. I should say it's fantastic.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
It's a pleasure to talk to you, Jeff. And I hope we've covered, some interesting territory today that may be interesting for everyone.
I loved every second of it. I can't thank you enough for hanging out with me.
Absolutely. My pleasure. And share the petition widely.
I've already done it on Twitter. I signed it and I've tweeted it out to multiple tweets.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
I'm trying to do my part.
I'll just say release Fantastic 494.
There we go.
That's it.
We're going to break the internet.
Check that out on Facebook and boom, you're there.
Boom.
Thanks so much.
How amazing was Joseph Culp? He's incredible. Oh, so fun to talk to. I loved all the stories he shared about his father, and I loved all of the Fantastic Four stories. It's great to hear it from Rebecca, Alex, and now Joseph. You hear it all from different points of view and kind of be able to put together the full picture from that. You can check out the movie. It is on YouTube. Release Fantastic 494. Use that hashtag. Sign the petition. I'll put a link in the show notes. All right, let's support the original Fantastic Four. Can't believe it's over already. This is completes the first trilogy. Maybe we'll get another one out of this. I don't know. I have to reach out to people. We'll see. Anyway, but this has been awesome. Joseph's awesome. Thank you again to Joseph Culp. Thank you again to all of you for coming back week after week. It means so much to me, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Classic Conversations. If you like what you heard, don't be shy and give us a follow on your favorite podcast app. Also, why not go ahead and tell all your friends about the show? You strike us as the kind of person that people listen to. Thanks in advance for spreading the word, and we'll catch you next time on Classic Conversations.